After the business trip in London, I came home thinking my husband would be thrilled, and our dog Buddy would be circling my legs, refusing to let go. But as I opened the door and stepped into the living room, it felt like I had entered a different world. The room was empty, not just tidy, but hollow. Only one thing remained: a single divorce letter lying cold on the floor. And then I froze when I saw my son's red robot. It pulled me back into the most heartbreaking memory of my life. My name is Charlotte, 35 years old, a manager of a luxury hotel in Boston. I had just pulled my suitcase through the gate of my house, the damp November chill of Boston still clinging to my coat after a 5-day business trip to London. I called out, "Carter? Buddy?" The same way I always did when coming home. But only a hollow echo from the familiar house answered me. When I opened the door and stepped into the living room, I froze. The entire house looked as if someone had wiped away every trace of a life that once existed here. The sofa was gone. The bookshelf left only pale, rectangular outlines on the wall. The paintings had been removed. Even my favorite beige rug had disappeared. The kitchen was bare, even the wedding dishes gone. The master bedroom was cold, leaving nothing but a dusty outline where the bed used to be. There were no signs of a break-in, only the thick silence of someone who had packed up with full intention. In the middle of the living room lay a divorce letter neatly placed on the wooden floor, as if positioned to make sure it couldn't be missed. And beside it was the thing that almost made my knees give out: Tommy's red transforming robot. The toy my husband, Carter, once ordered me to put away, refusing to let me keep it because bringing it up only makes everything worse. Yet now it was here, lying next to the letter ending our marriage, like a blade stabbing straight into memory. I held the robot to my chest, feeling both abandoned by my husband and dragged violently back to the day Tommy left me 3 years ago. My hands shaking, I called Mila. Less than 30 minutes later, she arrived, still breathless from running up from the parking garage. Mila had been my best friend for more than 15 years, once a detective with Boston PD, before switching to corporate security consulting. The kind of person who always saw what everyone else overlooked. She scanned the house once before saying immediately, "This wasn't a burglary, Lottie. This is intentional clearing." Mila suggested reporting Carter missing, but I shook my head and pointed at the robot. "This isn't something he forgot. This is a clue." Mila knelt beside me, turned the robot over. The reflection of the living room light made her pause. "Why are its eyes 2 different colors?" A chill shot down my spine. 3 years ago, after Tommy kept running into the backyard without adult supervision, I secretly installed a micro camera in the robot's left eye so I could watch him from afar. After Tommy died, I thought Carter had thrown the robot away. I searched everywhere for it. Mila used her small, careful nails to pry open the robot's head, revealing a micro SD slot. She handed me her laptop, her voice dropping low. "Lottie, do you want to see this?" I could only nod. When the screen displayed a folder containing video files from the day Tommy died, my hands shook so badly I had to set the robot down. Mila pressed play. I drew in a deep breath, bracing myself to confront the past I had tried to bury for 3 years, not knowing it was returning, sharper and more merciless than anything I could have imagined. Mila hit play, and the very first frame made my throat tighten. Tommy, my 5-year-old boy, was sitting cross-legged on the green rug in the living room, wearing tiny dinosaur-printed pajamas. The red robot lay in front of him, its low camera angle capturing only half of his round face, just enough for me to see him whispering the nonsensical stories children always invent. The TV hummed in the background, a cartoon episode Tommy had watched countless times, filling the room with a liveliness that made me almost forget I was watching a memory that would lead to tragedy. The doorbell rang suddenly. Tommy set the robot down and ran out of frame, his bright voice echoing, "Daddy, someone's here!" The robot was nudged, the image wobbling before stabilizing, pointing toward the front door. And then I heard the voice that had always unsettled me whenever she came near my husband. Haley Forrester. Her voice rang sharp, angry, unrestrained. "Carter, how long are you planning to play me? No money? No more sleeping with me? Fine. I'll tell Charlotte what happened last week when you were drunk and fell into my bed. I gripped the armrest tightly, my whole body turning cold. Mila glanced at me with concern, but I signaled her to keep going. The video captured Carter lowering his voice, trying to whisper, "Haley, keep it down, Tommy's home." "Kids don't know anything," Haley scoffed. "And you should remember who's keeping whose secrets." Heavy sounds of a struggle followed, then footsteps moving deeper into the house. The bedroom door slammed shut, leaving Tommy and the red robot alone in the silent living room. About 7 minutes later, the video picked up unusual splashing sounds outside, then a sharp plunk. I shot up from my seat, but Mila placed a steady hand on my shoulder, keeping me down. Then came Tommy's scream, small but clear, terrified. "Daddy, help! Daddy!" The splashing weakened, each sound piercing me like tiny knives, but from behind the closed bedroom door, the recording caught only the creaking of a bed and the breathless gasps of two adults, Haley and Carter, too lost in their lust and fear to hear their son drowning. I covered my mouth, but the tears came uncontrollably. Mila paused the video for a moment so I could breathe, but I shook my head and asked her to continue. I had to watch. I owed Tommy that. The robot lay where Tommy had dropped it. The video flipped, but the audio captured everything. 40 minutes later, the bedroom door flew open. Carter appeared in the frame, hair disheveled, shirt unbuttoned, breathing heavily. Haley followed, fixing her tight dress. Carter turned toward the pool, and the moment he shouted, "Tommy!" made me nearly retch from the pain. The video jolted as Carter ran out of frame. A loud crash, the splash of water, then chaos. Mila stopped the video. She reviewed the timestamp, checked the audio, verified the file's metadata. After several tense minutes, she nodded firmly. "This is the original file. No edits, no tampering. No one has touched it for 3 years." I stared at the dark screen after the video ended, my fists clenched so tight, my nails dug into my skin. For 3 years, I had lived in guilt, believing it was an accident. But the truth inside that small red robot revealed something far more brutal. My son did not die by accident. My son was abandoned. And the one who abandoned him was the man I once called my husband. I sat motionless for a few seconds, feeling like the weight of the world had just collapsed onto my shoulders. But Mila didn't let a single moment go to waste. She stood up, carefully gathered the robot and the memory card, and spoke with a cold but clear voice. "Lottie, this is only part of it. We need to look into the things Carter hid more carefully." And immediately, I knew exactly what she meant. The Equity Trust safe deposit box, where Carter and I used to keep our most important documents. We left the house at once, driving through the cobbled streets of Back Bay, the Boston wind piercing through our coats. Equity Trust was located in the financial district downtown. A gray granite building with classic iron-framed windows, solemn and intimidating in this moment. Walking into the bank felt like stepping into a place that was about to confirm every suspicion I desperately didn't want to believe. The staff recognized me. I'd been here many times before, and asked no questions when I requested access to Box 313, the one Carter and I held jointly. Mila walked beside me, silent, but her expression said she was ready to face whatever was inside. The heavy metal door opened into a small private room, separate from the main lobby. My hand trembled slightly as I pulled Box 313 from its compartment. I placed it on the cold steel table, took a breath, and opened the lid. The first thing that appeared was a police report with the conclusion, "Drowning accident." That line now read like a cruel joke, a lazy explanation covering up a darker truth no one had bothered to question. Beneath the report was Tommy's life insurance policy, signed exactly 30 days before my son died, a policy Carter had insisted on taking out, just in case. I remembered that afternoon he pressured me to co-sign, saying it was just a formality, and the beneficiary listed was Carter. My stomach tightened. Mila leaned over and nudged a leather-bound notebook lying in the corner of the box. "Lottie, this looks like an account ledger." I opened it, and the first page took my breath away. 36 consistent transactions, each for $8,000. Over the past 3 years, Mila flipped through a few more pages, her sharp ex-cop eyes immediately spotting the anomaly. The recipient was listed as HL Consulting LLC. The name made my skin crawl. Mila searched it quickly on her phone. Seconds later, she looked up, her eyes darkened. Shell company. No actual office, no employees. Registered owner, Haley Forrester. I felt like I was being strangled. 3 years, 36 transfers, $288,000. All drained from our family's savings, all to hide a truth Carter couldn't face. Mila snapped the ledger shut with a sharp click and looked directly at me. Lottie, this wasn't a one-time thing. This was a systematic blackmail operation, lasting years, and Carter let it happen. I gripped the edge of the table, the cold metal sinking into my shaking palms. The video had shown me the truth of the day Tommy died. But Box 313 showed me the truth of the 3 years that followed. A truth even filthier. And I knew. This was only the beginning. Mila didn't let me stay frozen in shock for a second longer than necessary. We need to confront Haley, right now. Her voice was so firm I could only nod. For 3 years, I had avoided Haley, uneasy without knowing why. Today, I finally understood. We drove to Forrester Corp., the towering glass building in Cambridge, where Haley had become a darling of the media, the powerful female CEO of the decade. The receptionist recognized me. My hotel had co-hosted events here, and didn't question my request for a private meeting room. Mila walked beside me, dressed neatly like a financial consultant, playing the advisor role flawlessly. The conference room on the 14th floor was so quiet we could hear the air conditioning hum. Haley entered with a smile too polished to be genuine. When she saw me, that smile faltered slightly, but she quickly regained her composure. Charlotte, I thought you were in London. What's so urgent you had to come all the way here? Haley poured water like she was hosting a business partner, not the woman she'd blackmailed for 3 years. I placed the transaction ledger and the life insurance policy on the table and slid them across to her. Mila sat beside me in silence, her eyes tracking every micro-expression on Haley's face. Haley glanced at the documents, then shrugged. Oh, Carter invested in my fund. You know, the transfers are just normal investor activity. I didn't reply. I simply opened the laptop, pulled up the robot's video, and played the exact clip of Haley screaming at Carter, threatening to tell Charlotte everything if he didn't give her money and keep sleeping with her the moment her own voice erupted from the laptop speaker. Haley's face drained of color. She shot to her feet, the chair screeching loudly as it slid back. Where did you get that? Her voice shook, the cool CEO exterior vanishing. I looked her straight in the eyes. From my son. Haley swallowed hard, trying to regain her composure, but failing. A few seconds later, she shifted tactics, like someone used to manipulating situations. She crossed her arms, leaned forward slightly, voice low and threatening. Charlotte, think carefully. If you release that video, Carter will be destroyed, and so will your career. You're a hotel manager. The press loves a juicy family scandal. Are you sure you want all of Boston to know your husband cheated and got blackmailed? Mila stayed silent, but I saw her hand subtly touch the inside pocket, where the tiny recording device was hidden. Every word Haley said was being recorded. Every threat. Every self-incriminating line. I said nothing, just stared at Haley with an expression even I didn't recognize. Pained, but cold. She sensed it and stepped back slightly. Mila, I said, without looking away from Haley, let's go. As we stood, Mila squeezed my arm gently, her way of saying, the entire confrontation was on record, not a word would escape. The conference room door shut behind us, but the fear in Haley's eyes stayed with me, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt the balance of power starting to shift in my favor. We had just reached the building lobby when my phone buzzed, a message from a number I had memorized for over 10 years, but had heard nothing from recently. Carter, Lottie. I'm at the cabin by Sebago Lake. I left the robot for you because I didn't know how else to tell the truth. Please come. I stood frozen for several seconds. The cabin at Sebago Lake, our family's summer retreat, where Tommy once ran laughing through the pine trees, a place Carter had locked and abandoned for 3 years since Tommy's death, a place I had avoided even mentioning, too full of memories. Mila looked at the message, then gently placed a hand on my shoulder. "We're going," she said, as if there was no other option. And truly, I knew I had to face Carter, for the first time since the red robot revealed the horrifying truth. We drove out of Cambridge, heading north, past highways lined with tall, shadowy pines. The closer we got to Maine, the colder and damper the air became, thick with foreboding. Sebago Lake emerged in the distance, a vast sheet of pale water under the evening light, so still it seemed to absorb our breath. The old wooden cabin sat tucked into the forest, its roof covered with dry pine needles, windows dark. The sight of it made my heart twist, as if the house itself was in mourning. Milo walked ahead. I followed. When I knocked, there was no answer. But the doorknob turned easily. It wasn't locked. Inside was pitch black, lit only by the dim glow of a single table lamp. In the middle of the room, Carter sat on the floor, back against the wall, surrounded by empty bottles like relics of countless hopeless nights. He looked up at the sound of footsteps, and the moment he saw me, his entire body seemed to collapse. Carter lunged forward, kneeling before me, gripping the legs of my pants like a drowning man clinging to driftwood. "Lottie, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." His voice was cracked, broken, nothing like the confident man who once led our family. I stood still, not touching him. Mila stood quietly behind me, not interfering, but always ready. Carter struggled to speak through tears. "For 3 years, Haley, she blackmailed me. She threatened to expose everything. What happened that day? Even that I stayed at her house. It started at $8,000 a month. Then she gambled, used drugs, made me raise it to $15,000 a month. Or she'd release it all." He clenched his fists like he wanted to tear himself apart. I just watched. Every word he said only widened the gap between us. Carter went on, his voice hoarse. I knew the robot might have a camera. I suspected it, but I didn't have the guts to check. I thought, if I left the robot, you'd find out, and I wouldn't have to watch you fall apart again." I looked down at Carter, the man I once thought would stand beside me for life. He was kneeling before me, not out of remorse, but because the truth had finally grown too big for him to contain. Mila stepped forward, her voice cold but firm. "Carter, everything you're saying can and will be used in a formal investigation, and we will use it." Carter lowered his head without protest. He knew, from the moment the red robot was turned on, that nothing was under his control anymore. Carter sank onto the old wooden floor, his hands trembling as he rummaged through the worn backpack he'd brought with him. He pulled out an old cell phone, the glass slightly cracked at the corner. Without waiting for me to ask, he opened the voice memo folder and handed it to me, like a man offering up the worst of himself with both hands. You need to hear this." His voice was hoarse, shaking as if it were about to break. Mila stood beside us, watching every movement. Her cold, razor-sharp gaze, never leaving Carter for even a second. Carter pressed play. Haley's voice filled the dim cabin, colder and more poisonous than any memory I still had of her. "If you don't give me $15,000 a month, I'll tell everything from 3 years ago. I'll tell your wife, the press, all of Boston. You think you can run, Carter?" The harsh, grating sound crashed into the walls, leaving no room for air in the small cabin. It felt like someone was squeezing my chest shut. Mila glanced at me, but I only clenched my fists harder, forcing myself not to collapse. Carter stopped the recording and looked at me with a desperation that begged for mercy I no longer had. I asked the question I had avoided for 3 years, the question I knew would change the way I saw him forever. Not just as my husband, but as the man he truly was. "That day, Did you hear Tommy calling for help? The room fell silent. Carter didn't speak, didn't cry, didn't defend himself. He only stared at the wooden floor, his shoulders caving in inch by inch under the crushing weight of his own truth. And then, he nodded. A small nod, very slow, but enough to shatter every last hope I had left. I grabbed the edge of the table to keep myself standing. My heart tightened, not because of the shock, but because deep down, I had known this for so long and just refused to trust my own instincts. Carter finally forced out words. His voice cracked. I thought he could climb back up. I thought it was just a few minutes. I didn't want Haley to lose it if I got up halfway. A few minutes, my son drowned in those few minutes. I looked at him, and in that moment, I no longer recognized the man who once vowed to protect this family with his life. Carter wasn't careless. He chose. He had enough time, enough chances, enough instinct as a father to save his child. But he chose to ignore it, chose to silence Tommy's cries just to appease the woman who was extorting him. And I understood. Tommy's death wasn't simply an accident. It was the result of a chain of selfish, deliberate, repeated decisions, before, during, and after the moment my son fell into the water. Mila stepped forward, placing herself between me and Carter like a wall. Her voice wasn't raised, but it struck like an arrest warrant. Carter, what you just admitted is no longer something between husband and wife. This isn't morality. This is a crime. And from this moment on, it will be handled by the law. I looked at Carter one last time. Not to find a reason to forgive him, but to remember the moment I truly lost him. Not because the marriage ended, but because he had lost his own humanity 3 years ago. Mila didn't let me sink into paralysis for even a minute. While Carter was still slumped on the cabin floor, she stepped onto the porch, pulled out her phone, and said briefly to me, "Lottie, it's time to begin the justice part." I only nodded, too drained to speak. Mila called a former colleague at Boston PD, someone she trusted completely after working several major cases together. Her voice was sharp, efficient, exactly like the investigator she once was. "We have the original video capturing the audio and sequence of events related to a child's death 3 years ago. We have blackmail recordings. We have suspicious money transfers. I need you to open a new file immediately." I heard rapid questions firing from the other end. Then Mila opened her laptop, transferring the robot's video, Haley's audio recording, and photos of every page of the ledger. Each time a sent successfully message appeared, I felt another invisible chain loosen from around my neck. After a few minutes of preliminary review, Mila's colleague confirmed through the phone, "This isn't just blackmail. There are signs of money laundering, coercion, and evidence concealment in a death case. We're forming a task force now. Mila, don't let anyone touch anything." Mila hung up and turned to me. "Lottie, from now on, everything must follow proper legal procedure. No negotiating. No compromising." The next day, I sat curled up in my lawyer's office in Boston, a bright room filled with case files, yet it felt like sitting on the edge of a cliff. My lawyer, Marilyn Shaw, a woman in her 50s, with a soft yet scalpel-sharp voice, listened to my entire story without interrupting once. Only after I finished did she clasp her hands together on the desk. "Charlotte, I'll be direct," she said. "From this point on, you're not just a divorcing wife. You're a provider of evidence in a criminal investigation. We must protect 2 things: your legal safety and your post-divorce rights." Mila sat beside me, adding information with the precision of a trained investigator. The robot footage, the recordings, the money ledger, and Carter's confession. Marilyn jotted notes quickly, then looked at me. "Carter won't go to jail for Tommy's death because the original investigation closed 3 years ago. But he can face civil liability, and he can absolutely lose all his assets if we prove he intentionally concealed and allowed the consequences to happen." I felt my insides burn, yet my voice was eerily calm. "I don't want him in prison. I just want the truth recorded properly. And I want everything that belonged to Tommy to be used the right way. Marilyn nodded, offering a small approving smile at my resolve. Then we'll proceed like this. You are the one voluntarily providing evidence to law enforcement. Carter will sign the divorce agreement, forfeiting all of his assets. All of it will be transferred into a fund under Tommy's name. This is legally sound, morally sound, and puts you in the strongest position before the court. Mila looked at me, her eyes gentle but firm. Lottie, this is when you take everything back, not for revenge, but to protect Tommy in the way you never had the chance to. I inhaled deeply, feeling the pain inside me shifting. No longer just a wound, but a force. Justice for Tommy didn't begin with rage. It began with a plan. And we had just laid the first brick. The next morning, while I was still in the lawyer's office finalizing documents, Mila's phone vibrated nonstop. She picked up, exchanged a few sharp words, then turned to me with eyes cold as steel. Lottie, the court just issued an emergency arrest warrant for Haley. My heart thudded once, hard, not from satisfaction, but from the weight of the truth finally rising above the surface. Mila stood immediately, gently pulling me up. Let's go. You need to witness this, so you remember you're no longer trapped in someone else's story. We drove to Cambridge, where the towering Forrester Corp building glinted under the noon sun. As soon as we stepped out of the car, I heard commotion spilling out from the lobby. 2 Boston PD detectives, wearing jackets marked "Detective," were walking toward the elevators with a female employee guiding them. No one needed to say anything. I knew exactly what was about to unfold. Right as the elevator doors slid open, Haley stepped out in her perfectly polished business attire, but that perfection lasted only half a second. The moment she saw the officers, her face froze. Eyes widening, body turning rigid like stone. Haley Forrester? You're under arrest for blackmail, money laundering, threats, and involvement in concealing evidence related to a child's death. The click of the handcuffs echoed sharply through the glass lobby, chilling and final. Haley stiffened, then attempted to pull away. You have no proof. This is a misunderstanding. Carter will... One officer cut her off. We have video, audio recordings, and transfer records. You have the right to remain silent. At the mention of the video, Haley turned her head toward me, her eyes a blend of hatred and fear. I said nothing. I simply stood there, neither stepping forward nor stepping back, as if the last 3 years had finally shifted, returning me to the place I should have been standing all along. On the side of the truth, the news exploded within minutes. The Boston Globe headline blared, Forrester Corp CEO arrested for blackmail. Investigation links to boy's death 3 years ago. WBZ News aired live footage of Haley being escorted away. Social media circulated clips of Haley screaming in the company lobby, flooded with thousands of furious comments. Employees of Forrester Corp crowded around, stunned as their CEO was handcuffed before their eyes. Within an hour, the Forrester Corp Board of Directors held an emergency meeting and announced Haley Forrester's immediate termination. The revolving doors kept spinning. Reporters, photographers, curious office workers, all swarming in to chase the story. And then they found me. Charlotte, did you know Haley was blackmailing your husband? Is it true the video captured the child's cries for help? Did you provide Haley's motive to the police? The questions pelted down like a hailstorm. I stood frozen in the swarm until I felt Mila's hand on my shoulder, steady, protective. She stepped forward, her voice firm, each word cutting cleanly through the chaos. No comment. Let the court do its job. Mila guided me through the crowd. I kept my head down, but I didn't tremble, didn't fear. Because unlike 3 years ago, this time, I was not alone. But the moment I stepped away from the reporters, I realized a more brutal truth. Public opinion is never one-sided. It took just a few hours for social media to turn this story into a shadow trial. Sitting in Mila's car, my phone buzzed nonstop with notifications. When I looked at the screen, hundreds of comments poured in like a waterfall. What kind of mother goes on a work trip and leaves her kid at home? If she'd been there, the boy wouldn't have died. Career women always put work first. No wonder their families fall apart. Carter was wrong, but Charlotte was irresponsible too. My stomach nodded. These were people who'd never met me, never known Tommy, never lived my pain. Yet they claimed the right to pass judgment on my life in just a few cruel sentences. On the other side, many unleashed their fury on Haley. Lock her up! She blackmailed that poor woman for 3 years? What kind of monster is that? Tommy's death can't stay buried anymore. Mila noticed the color draining from my face. She gently took my phone, powered it off, and said calmly, Lottie, listen to me. We don't explain ourselves to the internet. We speak to the court. Something in her voice pulled me out of a drowning current. Mila knew me better than anyone. She knew that if someone uttered the words, "You should have been there," I'd start blaming myself again, and that sentence alone could destroy me. I leaned back in the seat, closed my eyes to breathe, and instead of going home, I asked Mila to stop at the one place I could still see Tommy without being swallowed by grief. The public pool where he learned to swim. The water was calm and mirror-like under the white lights. I sat alone in the bleachers, listening to echoes, splashing, children laughing, a coach's whistle. These were the sounds of a world Tommy should still be living in. I remembered the first time he floated, lifting his head with wide, proud eyes, grinning so hard I had to film it. That smile was so bright it could warm an entire room. I looked at the water, and the question that had haunted me for 3 years returned. How many kids are just like Tommy? How many don't know how to face the water? Could Tommy's death protect another child from the same fear? And in that moment, with the faint smell of chlorine and the sound of water surrounding me, an idea rose. Not out of rage, but from the love I still carried for Tommy. A love that had never faded. I would start a free swim program for children. I would turn my pain into a chance to save others I would let Tommy live on, in the lives of kids made safer because of him. I stayed a little longer, watching the shimmering surface. For the first time since Tommy died, I felt like I had found a path not rooted in loss, but in hope. I brought the idea of the swimming fund to the lawyer's office the next morning. Marilyn Shaw saw the shift in my eyes. No longer trembling, no longer just grief, now it was determination. Right then, Carter walked in for the next meeting, looking so worn, I barely recognized the man who once stood beside me at our wedding. He entered with his head down, unable to meet my eyes. Mila sat silently in the corner, her eyes sharp and watchful. Carter's lawyer started with bland pleasantries, but Carter cut in, voice raspy. No need to drag it out, I'll sign. The air in the room dropped. Carter took the pen and signed the divorce papers. No negotiation, no conditions, no division. He set the pen down, hands lightly shaking. Under Massachusetts law, marital assets are to be split fairly, but Marilyn stood and pushed forward a waiver of rights agreement. Carter looked at it for a moment, then nodded and signed a second time. I said nothing, just watched him from across a distance we'd never cross again. Marilyn continued, as for the funds seized from Haley, $288,000 and a $200,000 fine. Do you want any of it? Carter immediately shook his head. No, give it all to Charlotte. I don't want not a cent from that. I looked at him, not with pity, but with a kind of cold acknowledgement. He had finally done something right. Even if it was too late, Mila folded her arms and leaned back. That money will go into the fund named after Tommy, she said, marking it into the air. Carter lowered his head even more. I didn't know if he was crying or just trying to disappear. But it no longer mattered. I didn't forgive him. I couldn't. But I didn't want him imprisoned either. I wanted him to live. And to carry with him forever the moment he nodded in that cold cabin. A sentence never spoken by a judge, but one that would hang in his mind forever. A life sentence of conscience. At the end of the session, Marilyn gathered all the papers into 2 files, one for the divorce, one for the district attorney, supplementing the case against Haley. Both will be submitted simultaneously, she said. One to end the marriage, one to begin the journey to justice. I stood up and took a deep breath. The door to my marriage was about to close, but the door to truth, the truth Tommy deserved, was opening wider than ever. Right after the divorce was filed, the Suffolk County District Attorney contacted me and Mila directly. They wanted to begin trial preparation immediately. This was no longer just a blackmail case. It had become one of the most high-profile trials in Boston, involving a child's death and the moral collapse of a well-known CEO. In the prosecutor's meeting room, I saw 3 large files neatly stacked on the table. The DA pointed to each one with a black pen. We're basing the case on 3 pillars: robot footage showing what happened the day Tommy died, and Haley's threats, audio recordings of the blackmail, including the demand to raise payments to $15,000 per month. 3 years of financial records confirming Haley used a shell company to receive the illegal funds. Each piece of evidence was a blade, and all 3 were closing in on Haley Forrester. Mila stood beside me, arms crossed, the strongest anchor I had. When the prosecutor brought up the video, Mila stepped forward, pointed to the metadata, and explained, "The footage is unedited. Timestamps match. The camera recorded continuously. Static lines are consistent with that model's specs. I'll testify in court as the technical verifier." The way she spoke, clear, firm, airtight, made me realize she had fully returned to her sharpest self as an investigator, and I silently thanked the universe that she was on my side. The hardest part fell on me. The DA placed a draft of my testimony in front of me. Just seeing it made my heart pound, because I knew it would force me to say my son's name, the details of his death, in front of dozens of strangers. "Charlotte," the prosecutor said gently, "you need to practice this many times, not to toughen up, but to ensure Tommy doesn't just show up as a bullet point in legal documents. You need the jury to see him through your voice." I nodded, though my throat was tight. That night, I sat alone in my new living room, holding the page, reading aloud. Tommy had soft brown hair. He loved red robots, and when he smiled, his eyes squinted. I broke down by the second sentence. Mila had to come over, sit with me for hours, until I could get through the paragraph without my voice cracking word by word. I learned how to turn my grief into language, so that Tommy wouldn't drown again beneath sterile court files. 3 days later, the court office released the official trial date. The media erupted. The Forrester Corp. CEO case became front-page news. WBZ, NBC, Boston, Fox 25. They all flashed red headlines. Haley Forrester trial, blackmail, money laundering, linked to boy's death. I watched the broadcast without shaking, without fear, feeling only one thing: the truth was moving toward a point of no return. On the day of the trial, Boston was gray and cold, the clouds hanging heavy, like the weight in courtroom 6 of the Suffolk County Courthouse. I sat in the front row, my hands clenched under the table until my knuckles turned white. Mila sat on my right, Marilyn on my left, like 2 rails holding me steady. When the judge struck the gavel, the lights in the room dimmed. The prosecutor stood, opened his laptop, and connected it to the large screen behind him. I could hear my heart pounding wildly in my chest. Everything had led me to this moment. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the prosecutor said, "this is footage from a microcamera embedded in the victim's toy robot, recorded on the day the child died." The screen lit up. The first thing to appear was Tommy, my son, in a light blue t-shirt, playing with a red robot on the living room carpet, then the doorbell. Then Haley entered, her voice sharp, demanding, threatening, then Carter's voice pleading with her to keep quiet, then the bedroom door closing, and then the sound I'll never forget: a splash. Tommy's terrified cry, "Mommy, help!" The flailing in the water, and then silence. A silence so long that even the packed courtroom didn't dare breathe. I bowed my head, tears falling onto my hands. Mila placed a hand on my back, light as a breath. The jury, 12 strangers, all stared at the screen, stunned. A woman in the third row covered her mouth. An older man squinted, rage etched across his face. When the video ended, the Boston PD digital forensics expert took the witness stand. "This video," he said, "is original, unedited. All metadata matches the time, format, and device." Each word struck like a hammer, sealing the last escape. Haley's defense attorney tried to object, but her voice faltered as the judge told her to sit. When it was Haley's turn, she was no longer the powerful CEO. Her hair was messy, eyes dark, lips pale. She tried to deny everything, but her trembling voice couldn't outweigh the video, the recordings, or the 3 years of documented blackmail. After 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned. When the foreman read the verdict, I only heard the first 3 words, enough to make me cry. Guilty, on all counts. The judge pronounced the sentence. 7 years in the Massachusetts Correctional Institution. Seizure of $288,000 in illegal gains. An additional $200,000 in civil fines. All to be transferred to Carter Henderson under the law. Carter stood from the back row, his face pale. I didn't turn to look, but I heard him sign the documents his lawyer handed over, signing without hesitation. Right then and there, he transferred all the funds to me, with a note, for the Tommy's Safe Swim Fund. I didn't look at him, didn't thank him, didn't blame him. There was nothing left to say. Justice for Tommy, though delayed, though imperfect, was finally written in black ink on white paper, in front of everyone. 2 weeks after the trial, I received a message from Marilyn. "Charlotte, the judge has signed. The divorce is officially finalized." I read the words in silence. No joy, no sorrow, just a quiet sense of release. Like a door that had long been closed, was now sealed by law with a red stamp. I went to Suffolk County Court in the afternoon, signing the final documents. Carter wasn't there. I hadn't expected him to be. We hadn't seen each other since the trial, and maybe that was the only right thing left between us. I officially received all remaining joint assets, not as a victory, but as the leftover pieces of a shattered life. The compensation from Haley's case was fully transferred into the account I had opened for the Tommy's Safe Swim Foundation, exactly as planned. Leaving the courthouse, I drove straight to the place I had signed for 3 weeks ago, the place I had spent many nights wondering if I deserved. The new penthouse in downtown Boston, located on the 44th floor. It overlooked the Charles River, where each morning the water glistened like tiny drops of gold. In the distance, the docks, boats tied to wooden posts, the soft waves lapping at the shore like a greeting from a life just beginning. I opened the door. No traces of old memories, no lingering items from the past, no Carter's footsteps, no hidden pill bottles, no unfamiliar perfume on the towels. Only open space, clean, bright light flooding the apartment. A new life, with no need to avoid the truth, no need to hide the wounds. I set down my suitcase, opened the last cardboard box, and lifted Tommy's red robot in both hands. No more trembling, no more fear at the sight of it. I had a custom glass case made, clear, minimalist, set on the wooden shelf by the large window. The light from the Charles reflected on the glass, shimmering in the robot's little eyes, eyes that had seen the truth adults tried to ignore. I placed the robot inside and gently closed the lid. No longer evidence, no longer accusation, no longer a weapon. Now it was a witness, a reminder that the truth had finally been seen and spoken aloud, no longer buried at the bottom of a pool. I stood at the window, looking over Boston beneath my feet, the traffic, the bridges, the glittering water. A new life was beginning, a life without Carter. A life where Tommy, somehow, would still walk with me. I spent the next 2 weeks doing what I had promised myself that night on the pool bleachers, turning pain into something good for other children. With the compensation from the trial and the remaining assets from the divorce, I founded the Tommy's Safe Swim Foundation, a fund offering free swim scholarships, sponsoring instructors, and organizing water safety education events for children across Boston. The community pool, where Tommy first learned to float, became the venue for a small launch event. No press, no long speeches, just a few families, A few instructors and children running around, their laughter echoing across the green-blue water. At the entrance, I hung a small plaque of light-colored wood. In loving memory of Tommy, let every child learn to stay afloat. When it was time to speak, I stepped beside the pool railing, feeling the warm mist in the air. My heart beat calmly, no longer trembling like during trial rehearsals. Today, I was speaking as a mother, not a witness. "I just want to say one thing," I began, my voice steadier than I expected. "No child should ever pay the price for an adult's silence, and no pain should stay buried at the bottom of a pool. Today, Tommy is seen through every laugh from these kids." The room was silent for a few seconds. Then the applause broke out, sincere and warm. I looked around, and there, in the back row, stood Mila, arms crossed, eyes a little red, but smiling proudly. She clapped slowly, not just for Tommy, but for me, someone who had fought her way up from the darkest depths. Mila once said justice isn't just punishing the guilty, but saving the ones who survive today. I understood that more than ever. After the trial and the fund's opening, Carter vanished from Boston. Not in the sense of running away, but in the sense of withdrawing from the world. Mila received word from the police. He had returned to the old cabin by Sebago Lake, where it all began, and where every lie ended. He refused to take back a single cent from the compensation. He stayed off the media. He contacted no one. He just lived quietly by the lake, day after day, staring at the still water, as if seeking forgiveness in a place where there was no one left to forgive him. A sentence not handed down by a court. No parole, no second chances. A life sentence of conscience. One early summer evening, Boston's sky was so clear that even the smallest stars were visible. Mila and I sat on the penthouse balcony, the wind from the Charles River cool and calm. In the distance, the city lights danced on the water, glittering, peaceful, no longer resembling the scene that once took my breath away 3 years ago. We poured 2 glasses of white wine. We didn't speak at first, just sat quietly, like 2 women who had survived a storm and were now savoring the stillness of the first sunny day. I raised my glass, looking out at the city that had witnessed my entire journey. To the truth and to new beginnings. Mila tilted her head, her eyes softening. She clinked her glass against mine and added a line that sealed everything we had been through. "And to Tommy, the bravest little witness." I smiled, realizing that the truth, once seen, can never sink again. The evening breeze moved through my hair, carrying with it a feeling of release I never thought I'd feel again. If this story touched your heart, leave a like or a comment and subscribe to the channel to help it reach the people who need to hear it most.